Okay, those are physical developments from prenatal stage until adulthood. Okay, next we are going to discuss about cognitive development. Okay, under cognitive developments, we are going to focus on cognitive development from childhood until adulthood. And later, we are going to look in more details cognitive processes that we use in adulthood. Okay, before we begin, okay, what is cognitive development? Cognitive development refers to how thought, intelligence, and language processes change or develops as people getting old or as people mature. Okay, all of these cognitive developments involve cognition or cognitive process. Okay, refers to the operation of thinking, also to our cognitive skill and abilities. Okay, when we talk about cognitive development, the most prominent psychologists, the most prominent figures are John Piaget. Okay, John Piaget introduces theory of cognitive development. In Piaget's view, humans use schemas to make sense of their experience. Okay, if we recall back what we have learned in the chapters of memory, okay, remember how human beings organize informations in their long-term memory. One of the methods using scheme. Okay, similar here. Schemas is basically a mental concept or a mental framework that organizes information and provide a structure for us on how to understand, how to interpret those information. Okay, there are two ways on how human being can modify, improve, or change their schemas. Okay, their schemas in their brains, which are assimilation or accommodation. Okay, assimilation is the process of incorporating of new information into pre-existing schemas. Okay, if we have new information about career, for example, then we will add this information in our available schema. Okay, in our available mental concept or mental framework. Say, for example, previously people only understand career as having employment, okay, working with someone, okay, developing their career developments from positions to another, growing up, okay, getting a better or higher levels of positions in a particular company. But now when people talk about career, people also understand about entrepreneurships and the new concepts in this gig economy, for examples, being a freelancer also can be considered as a career. Say, for example, you do not have any information, don't know anything about freelancer, okay? Now when you read, when people tell you, when you come across freelancer themselves, then you understand actually being a freelancer can be considered as career. You add on this new information as a freelancer into the available schema of career in your mind. So basically, you are using assimilation. Okay, beside assimilations, people can also use accommodations to change, to improve their schema about anything, about abstract concepts, about objects, about people, about environment, about knowledge, about everything. So what is accommodation? Accommodation is a process of adjusting of one schemas to new information. Okay, say for example, you come across now and new informations and you realize that the old informations that you know actually wrong. Okay, so what happens? You take these informations and you correct your old information. For examples, when people talk about quiet quitting, people always misunderstood quiet quitting as quitting the job quietly, while in fact in action, quiet quitting is not a real quitting. Instead, it shows low engagement and low performance. So in order for you to accommodate these informations, you change the schemas in your mind. Actually, even though the name is quitting, quiet quitting does not relate to anything about quitting a job or resigning a job. Instead, quiet quitting is basically stay, remain with the companies, but do the bare minimums. So in this second scenario, example are using a accommodation. Okay, according to Piaget, people develops cognitively based on 4 stages or 4 processes. Okay, so every human being will go through all these 4 stages of cognitive developments. Namely, first, sensory motor stage; second, pre-operational stage; third, concrete operational stage; and lastly, formal operational stage. Okay, you will find this figure in your textbook, okay, where it's explained briefly when we, or since the birth until 2 years old, people are actually at the stage of sensory motor stage. Okay, after that, from 2 years old to 7 years old, children started to develop pre-operational stage. And after that, from age 7 to 11 years old, young children will develop concrete operational stage, and later from the age 11 until adulthood, people develops formal operational stage in terms of their cognitive development. Okay, let's look at one by one from Piaget's 4 stages of cognitive development. The first one is sensory motor stage. Okay, from birth to about 2 years old. At this stage, the most important cognitive development in young infant is coordination. Coordination of what? Coordination of sensation with movement. So that these infants can move, can react physically from what they have been receiving. They have been sensing in terms of all of their sensory organs. Okay, they can react to what they see, they can react to what they hear, they can react to what they feel. So all of these involve coordination. And the most important development at this sensory motor stage is objects permanence. So what is object permanence? Objects permanence is infants' understanding that objects and events continue to exist even when they cannot directly be seen, they cannot directly be heard, or they cannot directly be touched. Okay, so the objects, the event is basically exist. So this is important development at the sensory motor stage. Okay, at this stage, infants started to develop or to use symbols or to use words in their thinking. Okay, after the sensory motor stage, young children, okay, infant develops pre-operational stage, okay, from 2 years to 7 years of age. Okay, at this stage, they are increased using of symbolic thinking, okay, thinking using words and symbols. Okay, however, at this stage, young children still cannot perform operations. So what is operation? Mental representations that are reversible, okay, such as conservation. So what is conservation? Conservation is a belief that the permanence of certain attributes of object despite superficial change. Okay, in your textbook, okay, the authors explain how by conducting experiments on the difference of perceptions among children when you use 2 different water bottles or glass. Okay, actually the amount of the water is still the same, just the shape of the water or shapes of the glass is different. Most children would believe that the water glass that is taller is basically bigger. Okay, even though the amount of the water it can hold is basically the same as the other glass, okay, the other water bottle. Okay, so it shows that basically at this stage, children still developing their operational thinking and their conservation. Okay, most of the thinking at this stage is basically egocentric. Okay, the thoughts of the infant and children at this stage is egocentric, meaning that they cannot take another perspective. this is where you can see young children will always want people to listen, okay, to follow and to agree to their thinking. And mostly, thinking at this stage is intuitive. Okay, it's not factual, it's not relevant, but mostly based on the intuition of the children. Okay, the third stage in Piaget's cognitive development is concrete operational stage. Okay, from 7 years to 11 years of age. Okay, by this stage, children are already able to establish operational thinking. Okay, for example, conservation, the one that we discussed before this. Okay, and at this stage, they are able to develop classification skills. Okay, they are able to understand categories, umbrella terms, generalizations, and grouping of attributes. Okay, at this stage as well, young children are able to reason logically in concrete context. Okay, they are no longer based, okay, their decision, their thinking on intuition. They can reason logically. Okay, in the last stage or the fourth stage of Piaget cognitive development is formal operational stage. Okay, formal operational stage from age 11 to 15 years old. Okay, however, researchers have been arguing on this. Actually, formal operational stage does not stop at the age of 15 years old. In fact, it continues throughout the adult years. Okay, we continue to develop our formal operational stage. Okay, at this stage, young adults, teenagers started to develop more abstract and idealistic thinking. Okay, start to have philosophies, start to understand values at this stage. Okay, most of thinking at this stage happen in the way of hypothetical deductive reasoning, the ability to develop hypotheses or best hunches about ways to solve a problem. So we can thinking hypothetically on how to solve, okay, to look for strategies, okay, ways to solve problems hypothetically based on deductive reasoning. Okay, those are the 4 stages of cognitive development introduced and developed by John Piaget. Okay, every individuals from childhood until adulthood, they will go through 4 stages of cognitive development. Okay, starting from sensory motor stage, continued by pre-operational stage, and then continue with the concrete operational stage, and lastly, we discussed just now, formal operational stage. Like I mentioned earlier on, John Piaget have introduced this and have an influence on the developments of cognitive development theories and concepts. Okay, his theories has been evaluated and expanded. Okay, in these sections, we are going to discuss on the approaches, okay, on the views, alternative views that discuss Piaget's theory. Okay, first of all, we are going to continue discussing an alternative view of cognitive development proposed by the nativist approach. After that, we are going to discuss Vygotsky views on cognitive development, where he stressed on cognitive development in cultural context. And after that, we are going to continue discussing about cognitive development from information processing approach. And lastly, we are going to continue discussing about cognitive development from revisionist view. Okay, first and foremost, when we discuss about Piaget cognitive development in its first stage, okay, sensory motor stage, Piaget focused on the coordinations between movement and as well as the sensory information detected or sensed by the infants. On the other hand, this view, the alternative view of nativist approach, they suggest that infants bring more with them into the world than Piaget have suggested. Okay, according to one of them, which is Spelke's co-knowledge approach, according to him, babies are born with domain-specific knowledge system. Okay, they have more than what Piaget called as coordination as well as object permanent. Okay, in these examples, core knowledge approach contain knowledge systems which involve about space. Okay, how infants are able to recognize space. Okay, the distance between objects between themselves, as well as number sense, even though they do not know how to calculate yet, but they have this number sense, object permanence like we discussed before, as well as tendency to develop language. And infants themselves, they try to communicate with their own perceived language. Okay, so this is the first alternative view where they rebut or criticize Piaget that infants not only have this limited knowledge of coordination, but instead they have a core knowledge system that they are built in within themselves. Okay, the second alternative view is provided by Vygotsky. Okay, cognitive developments in cultural context. Okay, from Vygotsky point of view, cognitive developments in cultural context is important in developing cognitive aspect of human being. Okay, cognitive development in this sense focus on interpersonal processes, okay, relationships, communication, interactions between individuals in the environment. Okay, interaction with more knowledgeable others, okay, such as parents, teachers, older siblings, and other peoples provide scaffolding, provide framework for the infants to build on their abilities, okay, build on their cognitive abilities. So in this aspect, Vygotsky stressed the importance of interpersonal relationship, importance of interaction with others in cultural context so that people will be able to develop their cognitive abilities. Okay, the third alternative views on cognitive developments introduced or proposed by information processing approach. Okay, according to this approach, it focuses on the basic cognitive processes that human beings are able to do. Okay, cognitive developments in this perspective focuses on working memory and executive function. Okay, recall back what you have learned in memory chapter. So this is basically we have discussed in more details in those chapter. Okay, in that chapter before. Executive function, second, which are higher order cognitive processes, including thinking, planning, and problem solving. All of these involved in the working memory. So in this sense, information processing focuses on cognitive development in the aspects of working memory and executive function. Okay, the last alternative views were provided by revisionist view. Okay, especially they focus on adolescents and adult cognition. Okay, from this perspective, okay, revisionist views, they focus on the characteristic of adolescence thinking. Okay, which one of it is egocentrism. Okay, when we talk about Piaget's cognitive developments, okay, in adolescence, we also look at how adolescents mostly their thinking focus on egocentric thinking. So similar in this case, adolescents' egocentrisms involve the belief that others are preoccupied with the adolescent as he or she is. Okay, that one is unique and that one is invisible. Invisible in this case means that unable to be harmed. Okay, what we means by preoccupied with adolescents as he or she is. Most of adolescents at their age, they believe that they are the center of attention. Okay, whereby people look at them, people evaluate them, they attract attention, people focus on them. Okay, that's why some of the behaviors of teenagers at this age, they always wants to attract attention. Okay, the second one, the one is unique. Teenagers always believe that they are different than others. Okay, nobody are like them, and no people are similar to one and another. And lastly, they are invisible. Okay, this is quite an important aspect to understand because of why at this age, teenagers, adolescents like to try to do things. And sometimes those are risky behaviors. Because of why? Because they feel that at that particular time, they are on top of the world. They are invincible. Okay, from a revisionist view, they believe that Piaget have underestimated infant cognition. Why? Because Piaget only talk about coordinations and object permanence. On the other hand, they think that, okay, these revisionists, they think that Piaget may have overestimated adolescents and adults' cognitive achievement. Okay, why? According to them, formal operational thought, okay, which are supposed to be achieved between the age of 11 to 15 years old, are not consistent or universal. Okay, Piaget stressed that by this age, okay, 11 to 15 years old, people would be able to achieve, okay, to achieve formal operational thought. However, when research have been conducted, they found that it is basically still have individual differences. Means that it is not consistent. Some people are able to achieve by that age, some others, some are not. So it's not universal. Okay, individual differences still play an important role. Okay, same goes to reasoning. Reasoning is not necessarily logical. Okay, especially in adolescence, reasoning usually influenced by emotion and sentiments. Okay, at this stage, reasoning is not logical. Instead, reasonings are emotional and sentimental. Okay, still, revisionist views, they believe that cognitive changes can occur even after Piaget's formal operational stage. Okay, after the last stage. Why? Because these have been shown that even in our middle and late adulthood, people can still develop their cognitive abilities. Okay, so it's basically people are not limited in terms of cognitive developments from the age of 11 to 15 years old. For Piaget, formal operational thought is the highest level of thinking. And Piaget believed that there is no new qualitative changes in cognition take place in adulthood. Okay, research has found that actually this is not the case. Even developmental psychologists, they have found that cognitive skills might have changed throughout adulthood. We develop some cognitive abilities in middle adulthood, and most people demonstrate a decline in their cognitive abilities when they achieve or go through late adulthood. And there are some strategies and training that can be done to maintain or sustain cognitive abilities even when we are at our late adulthood stage. Okay, those are all information in the first part in this cognitive development subtopic, which is cognitive development processes from childhood to adulthood. Okay, in the second part, like we mentioned earlier on, we are going to discuss on cognitive processes involved in adulthood. Okay, since we have at least three levels or three stages of adulthood, early, middle, and late adulthood, we are going to discuss cognition in early adulthood, cognition in middle adulthood, and lastly, cognition in late adulthood. Okay, first of all, cognition in early adulthood. Piaget's formal operational stage is replaced in young adulthood by more realistic and pragmatic thinking. Okay, remember in adolescence, we started to have this ability. We started to replace egocentric, instinctive thinking with a more logical reasoning. Okay, by early adulthood, people are demonstrating a more established realistic and pragmatic thinking. Okay, key aspect of cognitive development for young adulthood, okay, for young adults include one, deciding on a particular worldview or philosophy of life. At this stage, young adults are start to choose, okay, to commit to a philosophy, principles and values that he or she would like to believe and would like to practice on. Okay, second, recognizing that the worldview is subjective. Okay, during childhood, okay, and early in our teenagers or adolescents, most of the children would always inherit and take whatever their parents or their culture believe on. Okay, they basically believe whatever their parents are believing in is the most accurate or correct one. But when it comes to early adulthood, children or people started to understand actually the worldview, the philosophy, the belief are subjective. Okay, understanding, and the third one, understanding that diverse worldviews should be acknowledged. Okay, at this stage, people will start to understand that different people have different philosophy, have belief in different principles, and have different values. And they started to understand that everyone have the freedom, everyone have the tendency to have different worldviews. Okay, and lastly, in this early adulthood, people will start to understand that not all individuals are able to achieve the highest level of thinking. Only some individuals are able to attain the highest level of thinking. Okay, cognition in middle adulthood. Okay, the popular belief, and some of these are based on cross-sectional studies, they believe that in middle adulthood, people are starting to have lesser or lower cognitive abilities. Okay, middle adulthood is a time of cognitive decline. However, this popular belief is not necessarily so based on longitudinal research evidence. Okay, longitudinal research evidence has found that actually in middle adulthood, people even have their peak level of cognitive ability at this stage. The highest level of functioning for 4 out of 6 intellectual abilities occur in middle adulthood. Okay, these abilities include inductive reasoning, spatial orientation, perceptual speed, as well as verbal memory. Okay, only 2 of the cognitive abilities has been found to be declined or lesser in middle adulthood, which are numeric ability or mathematical skills, as well as verbal abilities. Okay, in the middle adulthood, research has found that this is the period when many people reach their highest levels of intellectual skill. Okay, their peak of intellectual skills during middle adulthood. Even so, our cognitive abilities will always show signs, okay, trends of declining when we reach our late adulthood. Okay, at this stage, speed of processing generally declines. Our memory retrieval skills are declines. We take longer times to process information. We take longer times to remember information. Okay, however, there are some aspects of thinking, okay, some aspect of cognitions may improve in late adulthood, okay, such as wisdom. So what is wisdom? Wisdom is expert knowledge about the practical aspect of life. Okay, expert knowledge. So why we are able to develop wisdom and in late adulthood, because at this stage you have accumulated a lot of prior knowledge. You have a lot of experience and you have been exposed to a lot of things. Combination of these 3 factors, people are able to develop wisdom at this stage of life. Okay, and there are even methods and strategies to improve cognitive functioning in late adulthood. Okay, researchers have found that strategy training and physical activities such as exercise and outdoor activities can improve cognitive functioning in late adulthood.